If I had to argue for a least sexist book of the Bible, I would argue that it's the Song of Songs. And then I would double down and argue that anybody who says that any other book is the least sexist book in the Bible is objectively incorrect. I don't think there's any meaningful way to quantify sexism in such a way that any other book would turn out to be the least sexist book in the Bible. It's got to be the Song of Songs. And I think the unique virtues of the Song of Songs, its unique egalitarian character, is best seen by comparing and contrasting it with two other books that people might be inclined to say are the least sexist books in the Bible. So if you asked a bunch of people, I think you would find a lot of people saying that Ruth and Esther were some of the least sexist books in the Bible. And to their credit, they are less sexist than many other books in the Bible. They have strong woman protagonists, heroic woman protagonists who, through a combination of cunning and creativity and resilience, are able to endure otherwise mortally lethal situations. And not only do they come out of that sort of better for themselves, but they also end up improving the lives of people around them to a smaller degree and to a greater degree between Ruth and Esther. But at the end of the day, there's still stories about sex work. While I don't think that diminishes the heroism of the characters anyway, I think they are heroic acts of sex work. That there are situations where a woman has to sleep with a man in order to secure an economically viable life for herself. That's sex work. While I don't think that diminishes their heroism in any way, it does put a pretty tight constraint on how egalitarian the text can be, because these women are essentially engaging in a kind of in a sexually coerced situation, in a situation that's coerced by the patriarchal circumstances in which they find themselves. So I do think that detracts a little bit from how egalitarian the text might otherwise be. In comparison, then, we can see that the Song of Songs does not have that element to it. It is purely about the spontaneous and consensual and passionate sexual agency of its main woman character, young woman, unmarried young woman main character, and not only about the expression of her desires and perhaps the fulfillment of her desires, depending on how you read some of the passages, but also her communication of those desires to her lover, to her friends. And that's it. That's what the whole text is about. It's a piece of erotic poetry solely dedicated to that. The text has no deeper meaning. I mean, despite the long history of Jews and Christians and other religious groups of people trying to allegorically read this as though it has some profound theological significance or relates more directly to men that are reading the text, I suppose is really what they're trying to get at. They're trying to appropriate this language so that it applies to men and their theological relationship with God. But if it has any deeper theological significance at all, it's simply that erotic poetry deserves a place in a canon. I mean, that's the deeper theological significance. But all that aside, I think that would have to be the least sexist, closest to egalitarian book in the Bible.